The showing felt great. The buyers smiled. They stayed a while. Hey, they even complimented your kitchen. And then they vanished. No second showing, no offer, sometimes not even feedback. So what happened? This is one of the hardest parts about selling a home, because most sellers assume if the buyer didn't like my house, somebody will tell me why. And they usually hope that it's because it'll be something that they can fix or handle. But that's not how it works. A lot of buyers leave a showing with a feeling, not a clearly explained reason. Maybe something felt uncomfortable. Maybe something distracted them. Maybe they didn't connect with the home the way they expected to. And most of the time, buyers won't actually say that out loud, because in today's Denver market, buyers are being far more cautious than they were just a few years ago. So small emotional reactions inside a house, well, those can matter a lot more than sellers realize. And sometimes they're actually still considering your home, but they're busy comparing it to other homes that they're viewing before they make that final decision. And they don't want to tell you anything yet because they don't quite know themselves. Now, this is where a good listing agent can be working for you behind the scenes. Because, sometimes feedback doesn't come automatically. Sometimes agents have to follow up more than once, ask better questions, or even read between the lines a little bit. And even then, buyers are often very careful about what they say because they don't want to offend the seller or hurt somebody's feelings, especially in homes where it's obvious the owners have lived there for a long time and really cared about the home. So if you're selling your home, don't automatically assume silence after a showing means buyers hated the house. Sometimes it simply means they're still comparing homes, they're undecided, they're nervous about payments, or they just can't clearly explain why the house didn't fully connect for them emotionally. Now, when you do get feedback, sometimes that feedback can feel incredibly frustrating because instead of hearing something specific, you get comments like, well, the home was nice, they're still thinking, it just wasn't the right fit, they decided to keep looking, and you, the seller, are left thinking, what does that even mean? The truth is, buyers often struggle to explain clearly the emotional reactions to a home. They may not consciously realize the house felt darker than expected, or the rooms felt smaller with furniture, or the road noise distracted them, or the layout simply didn't flow the way they'd hoped. They just walk away with a feeling that something didn't fully connect, because buyers are also trying to be polite. Most people don't want to criticize somebody else's home directly, especially when they know sellers might still be living there. Family photos are everywhere, or the owners clearly cared for the property. So instead of giving constructive feedback that a seller could use, buyers often soften their reactions into some vague comment that feels safer and less personal. That's exactly why sellers sometimes feel confused after multiple showings, because the real issue may never be said out loud. So what could you do as a seller with feedback like this? Well, first of all, try not to rely too heavily on one individual comment after a single showing, because one buyer may dislike something that the next buyer didn't even notice. What matters more is looking for patterns over time. Are multiple buyers mentioning the same concern? Are people moving through the house very quickly? Are showings slowing down? Are buyers consistently reacting to the same area of the home? That's when feedback starts becoming useful. And sometimes the most valuable feedback isn't even what buyers say, it's how they behave. Did they spend time in the kitchen? Did they skip certain rooms quickly? Did they stay long enough to picture themselves living there? These patterns behind feedback usually tell you more than the comments themselves. This is also where emotions can get sellers into trouble, because if every vague comment starts feeling personal, sellers can quickly become defensive, frustrated, or discouraged. Instead, it's usually much more productive to step back and look at the bigger picture strategically. Right now, as I'm out in the Denver market with my buyers, I'm seeing them not just compare price and square footage anymore. They're comparing feelings. Yeah, they're walking through homes and asking themselves things like, does this feel comfortable? Would my furniture fit here? Would my monthly payment still feel manageable 6 months or 6 years from now? Can I actually see myself living here every day? And a lot of times my buyers walk through a perfectly good house, but emotionally, they're still comparing it to the home they already have. I'm seeing this especially with my buyers who've lived in their current homes for a long time, because moving is emotional. People get attached to their routines, familiar spaces, neighborhoods, storage, comfort, even the little things they like to complain about every day, which means sometimes buyers leave a showing uncertain, not because your house was bad, but because emotionally they haven't quite caught up yet with the idea of making a major life change. And then this is also why presentation matters so much, because the easier you make it for buyers to picture themselves comfortably living in your home, the easier it becomes for them to emotionally move forward instead of mentally staying attached to what they already have. And that's exactly why I made another video about the subtle things buyers notice during showings that, sellers just simply stop seeing over time. I'll post that up here for you so you can watch it later. Sometimes sellers simply become too familiar with the home that they're in to see it the way buyers do anymore. Not because they've done anything wrong, but because after years of living there, certain things become part of everyday life. At the same time, most sellers are juggling a lot during a move. Pricing decisions, repairs, decluttering, packing, trying to find the next house, and managing timelines. So it becomes very easy to focus on the logistics logistics of moving instead of the actual experience buyers are having when they're walking through your home. That's one of the reasons I always encourage sellers to prepare early whenever possible. Because once you step back and start looking at your house more objectively, you start noticing little things that buyers might quietly react to during a showing. One of the best things you can do as a seller before listing is physically walk through your home slowly, as if you were seeing it for the first time. Open the front door, walk into a room, pause quietly for a moment and notice the lighting, the temperature, any smells, any noise, how crowded or empty the rooms may feel, and where your eye naturally goes. This is where having a trusted friend or an experienced agent walk through the home with you with fresh eyes can be incredibly helpful too, because they'll often notice little things that may be affecting buyers more than the seller realizes. And another thing sellers need to understand right now is that today's buyers are moving much more carefully than they were a few years ago. Like here in the Denver metro area, inventory has started increasing again. And this is due in part to homes sitting longer on the market than they were previously. Interest rates are still hovering between the mid to low sixes as I film this, and buyers are paying close attention to monthly costs, not just mortgage payments, but also insurance, HOA, taxes, utility costs, and future repair concerns. At the same time, this time of year can create a lot of distractions for buyers too. You've got graduations, Memorial Day weekends, summer travel plans, school schedules, vacations, uncertainty in the news, inflation concerns. So even if buyers like a home, they may move much more slowly than the sellers expect them to. And this is where sellers can sometimes become discouraged way too quickly. Because, a few years ago, homes sold almost immediately. But today's market requires a little more patience, a little more preparation, and a little more strategy. This is why it's so important for sellers not to panic after one slow weekend or a few quiet showings. What matters more is consistent showing activity, how buyers are reacting overall, and whether traffic continues, and whether patterns start developing over time. Because in this market, buyers are often taking longer to make decisions than they used to. But that doesn't automatically mean your home won't sell. This is why selling a home today requires a little more patience and perspective than it did a few years ago. Silence after a showing doesn't automatically mean something is wrong with your house. If the buyers might be comparing homes, and sometimes they simply need more time before making a major life decision. That's why the goal isn't to panic after every showing. The goal is to pay attention to patterns, stay realistic about the market, make thoughtful adjustments when necessary, and keep your home positioned as strongly as possible for the next buyer who walks through your front door. And in many cases, the buyers who eventually write the offer aren't even the buyers the sellers spent most of the time worrying about in the beginning. Hi, if we haven't met yet, I'm Peggy Durstoff with Live Denver Suburbs, powered by HomeSmart, and I help women over 50 make smart real estate decisions without pressure and without regret. And if you missed last week's video about the subtle things buyers notice during showings, I'll link that over here because these two videos really do go together. Thank you so much for watching, and I'll see you on the next video.